Let's bring in my good friend, Sky News contributor, podcast host, the wonderful Jane Marwick from Perth. Jane, I think we're getting to the very realistic end of this pandemic, at least for this year. We acknowledge and we certainly hope for a vaccine, but we know it's not here yet. We're seeing all of this economic damage that's outstripping the health damage that we feared, I think, at the start of the year, but now we are understanding a bit more now. We're really going to get back to work.
Yep, we do, Peter. And in a state like Western Australia, I do a podcast with farmers. So I've been talking to farmers today, and we've got this bonkers work and wander out yonder campaign paid for by WA taxpayers, put out by the state government, got a couple of girls skipping through an orchard picking a couple of cherries. Well, when you've got harvesters, it does my head in. When you've got headers and trucks worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, you want experienced drivers now and workers throughout the vast scope of agriculture and primary industries in this state. We need to get back to work in WA, and I agree with you about the whole masking and the Prime Minister about the true numbers of unemployed. Western Australia refused to sign up to any agricultural workers code that I think David Littleproud proposed at National Cabinet a week or two ago. So we've got 7,000 jobs going begging here. I can tell you that a vegetable grower had to plough in $100,000 worth of lettuces because he couldn't get anyone to pick them. That's just the tip of the iceberg, if you'll pardon the pun. Next are his collie and his broccoli. And we've got farmers starting to cut hay this week, Peter, because it's been pretty warm. They're now saying, the farmers I'm talking to are saying, don't worry about wander out yonder and all the kids who want to go to pubs and have fun. How about getting the pensioners? And I'd like Scott Morrison, and I hope the media monitors pick this up, to have a little think about this one. Pensioners, and there are plenty of grey nomads who are experienced, who have got a lot of nous, who could perhaps go back and work on these farms. These guys are desperate here in WA without perhaps losing their benefits and having their pensions cut. I know that sort of goes against everything that we're trying to do.
Jump in there, Jane. Your point is very well made. It's relatively simple to do because they could put in a reg change that says for a period of time, aged pensioners can increase the amount of money they earn. I don't think it would require legislation, certainly hasn't in the past. They would allow them just to have greater flexibility with how much they can earn over a given period and, do it as sort of a harvest bonus. I mean, the pensioners are going to have to work hard. It's not like it's a gift to them. We're just giving them a bit more headroom because after harvest, they'll be back to where they were. So they need to be able to return and not lose out. But I think that's a great idea.
So do I. And it comes from farmers, talking to farmers today. Now, of course, it's the Commonwealth Government that would have to give that the tick of approval. Mark McGowan had been asking, could people stay on job seeker and get their wages topped up? Well, I would like to see experienced truck drivers, header drivers, machinery operators who are on the pension not lose any of their benefits, Peter, their healthcare cards, just for this time up to Christmas. They are desperately, desperately needed. I mean, the idea that good food is being ploughed in and you've got a whole lot of people on job seeker. It's all out of whack. Australians need to get back to work, but I'd love Scott Morrison and the Commonwealth Government to take a serious look at this issue.
Let me just pull up something you said about your Premier in WA, wanting federal taxpayers to keep going with job seeker when you're saying that there's all these jobs going begging. And obviously you're in a very different situation than a state like Victoria. You're almost back to normal other than being able to cross your state border. In fact, I don't understand why there is the double dole anymore in places like WA, why there is job seeker if there are jobs. But McGowan wants to use job seeker and job keeper, more money from the Commonwealth, basically as a wage subsidy. Come on, he's got to start to govern here.
That's right. And look, any commentator worth their salt will say good leadership means making the tough decisions. It's really easy to keep the border up between Western Australia and the rest of the nation. I mean, I can make an argument about the ACT, about Tasmania, about the Territory, about the Northern Territory, areas that have no community transmission. I can't understand why those borders won't come down. The Premier always says it's something about the Constitution. But it's very easy. It's a very, very popular thing, that, we're West Australians and we're different, we're separate. Don't forget, we're going to an election here in March. Everyone's focusing on Anastasia Palaszczuk and the machinations there and getting the AFL Grand Final. Western Australia goes to an election in March. This is populism at its very, very worst. So we've got a bunch of people who are unemployed and we've got a heap of people on JobKeeper and JobSeeker. And I think it's... I was blown away when I heard the Premier sort of touting this idea that people who are getting the double dole would continue on the largesse of taxpayers throughout Australia and then wander out yonder and pick a couple of cherries and go to the pub. Forget it. But honestly, if we could get those pensioners back into work, that would be a very good thing.
Now, just let me remind people at home, because the Prime Minister reinforced this again today. To date, the Commonwealth taxpayers, you have spent this money. $314 billion is on this pandemic. Every state and territory combined, 55.1. So $314 billion at the Commonwealth level, 55.1. All the states and territories combined. This is about politics, very much about politics in New South Wales, in WA and also Queensland.
Sure is.
And the politics are being played through in some of the media shenanigans. Now, I want to bring this one up too. Nine Network, political editor Chris Uhlmann, considered, one of the best going around in federal politics. He isn't a fan of the Labor government's response in Victoria to the pandemic. He wrote a scathing opinion piece in Wednesday's Sydney Morning Herald. Now, his pieces usually appear in the sister paper in Melbourne, The Age, but it didn't. It didn't, only until the bias was pointed out, and they hastily then ran it in The Age the next day. Now, we talked about how the media can play games last week, Jane, and we said we'd come back to it this week, but it's not just a Victoria, New South Wales issue. You've got plenty of examples in the West.
Yeah, we do have plenty of examples in the West, and I would say that the Premier of Western Australia, we saw that poll of 837 people saying 91% love what the Premier is doing, 92% are in favour of that hard border. That front page. Now, that poll went up just before, on the Thursday or the Friday, before he went to National Cabinet. So, it's sort of fanning all of that. So then he goes into National Cabinet and says, well, I'm not budging on the hard border. I'll keep taking your Commonwealth money, but I'm not budging on the hard border. So the Premier has got a very, very sympathetic press here at the moment. Now, I don't mind any newspaper taking an editorial point of view, but it is incumbent on media organisations, I think, to look at both sides of the coin and hold people to account. I mean, we had the Premier coming out this week saying he was very, very, very angry, three verys, very, very, very angry that Michael McCormack, he says a lot of verys, that Michael McCormack had said that Western Australia would have to take more return travellers, as though this was some bolt from the blue. But I actually went back and watched his press conference from a week before where he said Western Australia, we'll do our bit, we'll take more return travellers. But there's not a lot of accountability for the Premier, who is incredibly popular at the moment, Peter, and I don't feel there's enough scrutiny of government policy on the whole. I can tell you the only reason they did wander out yonder and work was the Nats are putting pressure on them in the regions, and that was of some concern to them.
Yeah, I'll go back to the point I made at the top of the show. New South Wales is taking 40% of people that are not New South Wales residents. I think the pressure's got to be on every Premier. If they're your people, you take them. And the ones that are pushing back that don't want to take people, WA and Queensland, I suspect is they are worried that their own contact tracing is not up to speed.
Yes.
And they are worried in an election cycle as close as it is for both of them to a poll, that they will be shown up for not having this system working. Now, before we go, Sir Tom Moore, we've had him on the show, as you know, that lovely man in Britain, former soldier,
brilliant.
All that money he raised, 56-odd million Aussie for the NHS, up and down his garden. He went 100 times. He's got an autobiography out and he's just signed on to a 2-part documentary of his life. But have a listen who he thinks is up to playing him.
If there's a film, who would you like to play you?
I think David Beckham.
David Beckham's the favourite.
He looks
Good choice,
like the sort of person. He looks a very nice person. I mean, and he is. he's quite young and
And quite young and good looking, so you're happy with him?
Yeah, yes, he's. Whenever you see him, he moves about so well. He's a person who looks as though he's alive all the time.
He doesn't miss. He wants someone handsome. He wants David Beckham. He's gorgeous, Jane.
He is brilliant, and thank you for ending on such a high note, Peter. He is fantastic, and I can't wait to see the document. And if you were David Beckham, you'd have to say yes, wouldn't you? Although I don't know how good David Beckham is at acting. He's good at soccer, but I don't know how good he'll be at acting. But anyway, you'd have to say yes, wouldn't you, Peter? Doesn't matter.
If Tom wants him, let's have him. All right, Tom. Anyone who wants to catch up with Jane and all of those podcasts in particular, you want to follow what's really happening on the ground in terms of jobs and regional Australia, jump onto Jane's podcast, The Jane Marwick Show. Thank you, Jane. See you next week.
Thank you, Peter. See you.